Hello, and welcome to Earshot episode number 4. With the new year passing a few weeks ago, I thought it might be special to do an episode about 2021. For me, it was a very busy and strenuous year, but there were lots of great gems along the way. In thinking about this episode, I realized that there was so much great music that happened in 2021 as I was going through recordings I was familiar with and remembering back on performances that I remembered. As with a lot of things in the pandemic, many of these performances were attended online and are luckily archived so I can go back and enjoy them. But as I was trying to curate a playlist and thinking about what kind of music to include, it struck me that there was so much music that I had missed and so much amazing music that I hadn't heard last year. So I thought that this playlist would be a collection of music that I hadn't heard from 2021, or that I had missed or was too busy to hear. And I think that maybe this gives us a chance to reflect back on how much amazing music has been created, especially contemporary art music, in the last few years. So I've organized a playlist with 6 selections. These selections are Nina Young's Drink Rain, which is a stereo piece of electronic music. Payton MacDonald's, actually a few selections from Payton MacDonald's albums collections that he's recorded over the last year and a half now. Those are really special. There's actually 3 selections from those works that I've put together and counting them as one. The next is Austin White's Multiple Chains for piano. Up after that is Andil Comallo's The Broken Mirrors of Time. And then Forbes Graham's String Quartet number 3. And then Ingrid Stolzel's Musica, Ignota. This playlist is mostly music I didn't hear until I started looking to put together a playlist with music from 2021. So I hope that you enjoy these selections and enjoy the playlist. Today I've brought on Austin White to help me with some commentary. Austin White is a composer living in State College, but just like me and Contemporary Art Music Project, he's originally from the Tampa Bay area. I hope you enjoy tonight's episode. We've picked out some really special pieces and are excited to share them with you. As I will say later in the episode, there's a couple of different ways you could listen to this. You could either go and listen to the whole playlist ahead of time to familiarize yourself with the music, or as we're going, you could pause and listen to the pieces, which we did as we talked about them. We sort of talked about them right after listening to them. So if you're listening live, it might be best, hopefully, to listen to the playlist ahead of time. Or if you are just picking it up after it's been published, then it might be nice to pause and listen to each of these selections. The selections can be found in the show notes, so go check it out. Welcome, everyone, to this episode of the Earshot podcast from Contemporary Art Music Project. I'm your host, Tucker Johnson. I'm joined today by Austin White, a composer who was born and raised in Tampa Bay, Florida, like myself, and like the Contemporary Art Music Project. Austin is currently pursuing his bachelor's degree at Penn State, where I briefly shared a room with him. I'm excited to share this podcast with him this evening. Austin, how are you?
I'm doing well. I'm super excited to be here and listen to all this wonderful music.
So first on our playlist tonight is Nina Young's piece, Drink Rain. I think it's pretty fitting for us to start with a piece which was completed over the New Year season last year. According to the description on SoundCloud, she wrote it in Puerto Rico between December 25th, 2020 and January 2nd, 2021. So it sort of ushered in the new year about a year ago with this piece. Drink Rain by Nina C. Young. Yeah, so, wow, that piece is really crazy. It kind of like, feels like it goes through so many different phases or states. It's almost like we end up maybe not where we thought we were at the beginning with these like really raw, sort of like loud synthesizer tones, and into this sort of like groovy drum beat thing in the middle. All the way to the like the ending, which almost sounds like a music box. The spatialization has this like music box effect of it sort of cycling around your head.
Yeah, it's really gorgeous. I mean, it definitely has this sort of gradient nature, and it's like this feeling of just musical interpolation, and also the use of such like heavy synth material is like really interesting to me as a decision. Like it's been a while since I've listened to an electronic work that had such a focus on synth material. And the way it blends with particularly like the bird motives in the beginning, it's like this strange feeling of like almost transcendentalism, but in this like new state of technology. It's really gorgeous.
Yeah, I find that as I'm listening to this piece, I'm always sort of holding on to where I am. It's sort of like I don't want it to move from what I'm listening to when I'm currently there. I feel almost sort of dragged away from it when something changes. And I mean that in like a good way. It's sort of like I feel so enriched by the sounds that are happening at every moment that I almost don't want them to go away.
Oh, absolutely.
And then the presence of this the sort of like voice, this sort of text-to-speech voice, speaking the text, which is excerpted from Kim Adonisio's poem Muse. The text that's used specifically in the piece is "Drink rain from the pulse at my throat," which is sort of fragmented, and you get little pieces of it. You get a lot of "Drink rain," and then towards the end of the little drum beat section, you get the "pulse at my throat" part of the phrase.
Yeah, which is such a great choice. I definitely feel like a sort of influence of like some aspect of like IDM, like, and especially like when the drum break comes in, it almost, although I didn't quite hear like an actual sampling, it feels like that Amen break-esque sort of like reference as well, which is really interesting, which I find like kind of fits really well with this poem. Definitely.
Yeah, and this piece is so, I guess, so different from the other purely electronic piece that she produced in 2021. I don't know if you were familiar with it, but she did a wave field synthesis piece with 20 audio sources.
Oh, wow.
Later on in 2021. The piece is called Phosphorescent Devotion.
Ooh.
And it's like this crazy surround 20 sound source wave field synthesis piece that is just like really sort of different from this piece. It's this piece is so much more, not more, but it's so much focused on I guess sort of one thing at a time, or this sort of I feel like I can I don't need to like have 20 sources to get all of the information in this piece.
Absolutely.
It sort of comes right at you, and it's very close. Yeah. No, it's really beautiful. Yeah, so we were talking about Drink Rain by Nina Young. It's a piece that was produced at the very beginning of last year. And if you haven't listened to it already, I recommend you go check it out on her SoundCloud. So if you're just joining us, you can follow along with the links in the show description for the playlist. Each piece is sort of listed with a link for where you can go listen to it, and you can probably find some information on it there. And if there's any other information, Austin and I will point it out and make it clear. So up next, we have a really wonderful collection of 3 pieces, actually, by composer, percussionist, Indian classical musician Payton MacDonald. Payton MacDonald is an amazing sort of polymath musician who traverses all of these different kinds of music, always with a very, very creative lens. I believe he prefers for the music that he creates to be called creative music. Remember for the couple of conversations that I've had with him. And he embarked on this huge project about a little over a year ago, I believe October of 2020, to record 52 albums in 52 weeks. So
wow.
He's going to record a full album of recorded music every week for an entire year. And he was successful in doing that. He recorded 52 albums and finished up this past October. And it's a really amazing project. But he actually decided to just keep going. So he's now at, I think, 64 albums or something, and he plans on going to 100 or at least 2 years worth of albums every week. And these are like full production recordings, and they've got lots of different kinds of content. There's sort of experimental improvisation, things where he's building mallets to play the marimba with, like really interesting, attaching ping pong ball to the mallets. I remember he polled online to see what to call those, and he ended up calling them stochastics. Sort of
That's fantastic.
because of the way that they sort of randomly flop on the marimba bars. And then he's doing projects like continuations of his Super Marimba project, which is something he's been doing for many years, which is a sort of minimal improvisation practice with electronics that almost creates this sort of trance psychedelic music. So yeah, I have I picked out 3 selections from the last year of album recordings that he's done. 2 features in them. The first one is an improvisation recording with saxophonist Aaron Rodgers and Payton MacDonald playing percussion. The second is a solo improvisation recording from one of the other Explorations albums. And the third is this sort of Super Marimba minimal project with Indian tabla player Sean Madavetsky, who's a Canadian-based tabla player who is a really amazing Indian classical musician. So let's dive in. Open 2, Pulse Release, and Elements by Payton MacDonald. Yeah, I mean, like, Payton's work here is like so huge. It's difficult for me to even imagine listening to all of it and trying to comprehend all of it.
Absolutely.
Like he has come out with one of these full-length albums, not just these little tracks every week for like 64 weeks now. And like I don't have enough time to like listen to that amount of music each week as they come out. And I've spent like quite a bit of time digging through these, listening to ones. So these selections that I picked out are from a fairly small collection of them from this past fall that I've really listened to a lot. But there's so much in these. There's complete albums of Hindustani music played on marimba, sort of interpreted on the marimba, and then a whole nother collection of Payton singing. Payton is a professional Drupad singer. I mean, his voice is insane, and his ability with that kind of music is really, really staggering. So the first selection we had was Open 2 from Explorations 34, which features saxophonist Aaron Rodgers. This like just this track is like really staggering with the sort of musicianship and the kind of
absolutely
listening between the two players.
Yeah, it's highly unusual to be able to experience such high levels of musicianship and create compositional creativity for me. I mean, I've had the pleasure of working with Aaron Rodgers in the past with the group Hypercube, and I mean, just the timbral shifting that she can do with the saxophone. I mean, when I first listened to this, I thought it was microphone feedback in the beginning. An unbelievable sense of space, and this recording has amazing rhythmic propulsion and fascinating contours, really.
Yeah, the sense of rhythm is something I was really drawn to, especially. There's like, there's this communication between pushing and pulling. It's not this sort of like regular sort of metered rhythm so much as it is this sort of almost dialogical rhythm of these two like characters pushing and pulling at each other in different ways, where sometimes they'll be layering in such a way where the two kinds of layers are completely different, but they suggest a different kind of temporality, and those sort of reach across into each other's parts, each other's performances.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'd be interested to know about the process of them getting together or recording it. You know, given the time of year with COVID and stuff, because I just, you know, with social distancing and all of that taken into mind, like the amount of listening and just like, you know, frankly, musical groove is just, it's bar none. It really is.
Yeah, and I mean, like, again, situating in this project, Payton writes on his website about this project that each recording he does takes about 20 hours a week of work.
Wow.
And especially the open improvisation solo ones, he says, move fairly quickly. But that doesn't account for the thousands of hours of study and practice that has gone into him, you know, being the musician that he is, which I think is, like, really what's on display here. The amount of creativity and the amount of power that Payton has as a musician. In the second track, which is Pulse release from Explorations 39, which was released later in the fall, a couple of weeks after the one with Aaron Rodgers, which is a very short track. I picked that one out particularly because it sort of displays Payton's virtuosity on the marimba. It's really hard for me to tell if this piece is completely improvised or even composed. It has this quality of crystalline quality where it feels so intelligently put together.
Absolutely. I mean, to me, it was like, it felt like this structure was unfolding that had this like sort of serialist quality, some sort of European influence, yet the fact that it's improvised with the interval content and the way it was like spinning out and the rhythmic sort of nuances was like unbelievable. I mean, if I could improvise like this, I don't think I'd ever write a note down a day in my life.
No, the especially like the way that it just sort of drives forward with this incredible complexity, but it feels like such tight control. It's like really an incredible performance and really an amazing release. That album as a whole has these tracks like this on it, and many of the Explorations ones do. The last one that I shared is the Elements track from Super Marimba 13. Super Marimba is a project of Payton's that goes beyond this 52-week project, or this 64-week now project. Super Marimba is something he's been doing for many, many years, and it started as a sort of practice of marimba improvisation with looping pedals and looping software. He would do these long live performances with the marimba, creating these sort of minimal textures and these sort of slowly unfolding repetitive music that is really actually it's very captivating and really incredible that it's done sort of on the fly. I picked this one out particularly because Sean Matevetsky is also included playing tabla, and I think the tabla fits really the tabla fits really well into this texture. Especially like there's that moment in the middle where the marimbas kind of release and the tabla plays these little cadenzas that are so like incredibly like beautiful and timbrally interesting. And there's also a large amount of electronic sort of manipulation on this track. There's distorted marimba, and there's marimba sort of turned into this like sort of bassline sounding instrument.
I was curious about that because it really felt like a double bassist was just holding down a groove, and I was like, how is that possible? It was a really great manipulation.
Yeah, I know Payton's been working quite a bit with I think in Ableton to produce these kinds of sounds, and it really comes through in this track, especially on Elements. But I mean, these projects as a whole are insane. I'm just like scrolling through his website right now, and I see things that he's done. A couple of the albums involve fixed compositions from composers who he's commissioned. He made the first solo marimba recordings of music by Anthony Braxton, Elliot Sharp, and Barry Guy.
Oh wow!
He made the first ever marimba recording of Hindustani music, as I mentioned before. But these are like groundbreaking albums, and he's doing them every week. They're really, really crazy, really amazing, powerful works. And a couple of the more recent ones that he's been producing come with these graphic scores that he's produced for the performances, especially with some of the work he's done in collaboration with others. But yeah, I mean these pieces are just incredible, just crazy. And again, like it's so much work that it's almost staggering for me to imagine digging into it. So I recommend just start with one, just pick one out, scroll through his Bandcamp page and just click on something and listen to it. It's almost like how you need to appreciate it, and buy a couple of them to help financially support this project. I mean, it's a huge amount of time put into something, which it would be sad if it gets sort of missed.
Yeah, the scale of this work is just unbelievable. I mean, really, like, this is the kind of thing you can go and just have a wonderful weekend listening to.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
For forever. Just keep going, finding another recording.
Yeah. All right, so up next, we have a piece by you, Austin, and I didn't want to have you on without sharing a little bit of your music, and this piece in particular, Multiple Chains, which was people probably haven't heard it yet, unless they were at the concert at Penn State, as I think it was premiered at. But this piece was premiered last semester, but the recording wasn't available online until the beginning of this year, so people may not have heard it yet. But this piece is Multiple Chains for solo piano. Multiple Chains by Austin White. Wow, Austin, that piece is really gorgeous. It sort of it unfolds at a pace which feels I guess almost friendly and to me almost sort of inviting. It sort of invites me to listen to the very individual things that are going on in the piece.
Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, it was a really unusual process of composing it. It's sort of I was working on looking into these sort of all twice saturated, all trichord M chains kind of thing. And
can you explain very quickly what that is, just for people who may not know?
Yeah, absolutely. It's pretty much like you start with a trichord, and then by adding each consecutive pitch to it, you make sure that it completes a consecutive trichord that has an M relationship to it, which is a kind of pitch relationship that comes from multiplying a group of pitches, which you can put on a pitch clock wheel. And when you multiply them, oftentimes you'll get another set of pitches. And since there's only 12 notes in the Western 12-tone equal temperament system, you do modulus 12 multiplication. But it's pretty much like just organizing these cycles of notes, preserving these relationships, these multiplication relationships among them.
So if I'm understanding correctly, it's sort of like a chain of a trichord, and then the next trichord would be the last two of the previous trichord and the first next note.
Yeah.
Is that correct? So the trichords overlap into these chains of multiplication transformations.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Okay.
And yeah, while I was doing it, or just messing around with these sort of unique objects, I just put a couple against each other and immediately spit out the whole composition. And it sort of reminded me this story about Robert Helps when he was composing his homages. One of them he was working on, I forget who he was studying with, he brought in, and the person was literally like, it's done, it's finished, even though he sort of didn't do much but just wrote the scaffolding. And I felt it was quite apropos once the sort of system just spit itself out to just say it's said and done. And I was fortunate enough to work with Parker Conkle, the pianist, who's just an unbelievable musician, and very grateful that he sunk his teeth into it. And also he's having his senior recital here at Penn State April 8th. And we're going to be working together on another piece to premiere then too.
Will that be available to live stream? Do you know?
I believe so, yes.
Okay,
yeah.
Great. Yeah, well, I'll make sure I share it. I share it on the internet when we get to it, and maybe plug it again on our show if it's closer. And but Parker's interpretation of this piece is really amazing. Again with this sort of like putting the piece together, and it just sort of happening from looking at these objects. I sort of felt that in the piece, and the title evokes this as well. I remember upon listening to it for the first time, or at the very beginning of the piece, I sort of felt that that these chains were reaching up, where you sort of had these chains going from the bottom of the piano to the top of the piano. But as things sort of settled in, I started to realize that what you have are these chains really locked into registers, and you feel them sort of progress at different speeds. And that was particularly one of the most interesting things with listening to this, is feeling that sort of combination of multiple temporalities, all sort of marching along these little strands. And it leads for a really amazing listening experience, where you have these little chains to follow as you're listening.
It's really interesting. Like, it's made me think a lot about like composing sometimes structures is like you start with this two-dimensional piece of instruction, like and then you shine these like lights to give it a shadow of this two-dimensional object, and what you construct around this shadow and what you mold is this piece, because really all I had was pitch and time, no dynamics, no anything like that. And from there it's like just modeling this simple structure and in this case just putting it straight to the piano. But yeah, it's definitely, writing this piece has given me a lot to think about moving forward.
Yeah, I think my thought immediately is I would love to hear something like this for an ensemble where the voices are very easy to delineate. It's sort of here you sort of have to parse the pieces, the voices almost. I mean, they're fixed in their register, but it would be interesting to hear this for almost like an orchestra where you can sort of assign these kinds of voices or to a chain.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Thank you.
So much for sharing this piece. I'm really glad we got to share it on the show. Yeah, thank you. So up next we have a really amazing composition by Andil Comallo, who is a composer who's born in South Africa and studied composition in the U.S., went to Columbia and studied with George Lewis, and is now a very well-established composer, writing really complex, not so much complex, I guess, that's maybe the wrong word, really intricate and incredibly thorough pieces of music. I really can't highlight enough how much his music feels just sort of thought about in a very serious way. This piece is The Broken Mirrors of Time is the title. It was written for Klangforum Wein and performed at Dona Eschinga this past fall. The Broken Mirrors of Time by Andil Comallo. All right. Yeah, that piece is really stunning. It's got so much breadth to it. It's sort of is in this constant state of flux where you're never really comfortable where you are, but the music is always propelling you somewhere. I mean, the sort of progression of the piece, it feels like it has this very sure direction that it's moving in, where it does feel like there is this sort of process unfolding, but you never really know what the next step is. You sort of know what the goal is, not so much what the next step to get there.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like this really conscious unfolding of material. And it's just, I mean, with the tremendous orchestration and like these motives disseminating naturally out of these moments of more rest and more activity, it's just an unbelievable piece with a gorgeous timbral and harmonic landscape. I remember first listening to this around like 2 minutes and 30 seconds, and I hear this nice Lydian tetrachord take over in the piano, and all these harmonies just start cascading out of it. And it's just unbelievable. I mean, it feels like some sort of ultimate organic force is unfolding.
Yeah. And you get that impression right at the very beginning, at least for me. Like, you hear the first couple of seconds and you almost immediately know that this piece is going to go everywhere. It's going to sort of like spread out and take over everything, and do every kind of texture you can imagine it doing.
And then some. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. It has this incredible ability. It has this incredible continuity and disjunct character where you have these. It's almost improvisational. It feels like where you have these sort of sounds like the trills at one point near the beginning that sort of all sort of dovetail into each other, and you never really know which instrument has the trill or where it is, or something like the sort of breakdown of this chorale section a couple minutes later where you have these chords and then the piano comes in and gives it some sort of movement and vitality that changes what's going on quite drastically. I listened to a piece by Khumalo live last semester. Eastman's Musica Nova ensemble did Khumalo's Invisible Self, which is a similar kind of ensemble piece from the year prior. I was on a concert with Solar by Kaya Sarayaho, which is a large sinfonietta piece, and Assemblage by George Lewis, which is another sort of medium size chamber orchestra piece. And this ensemble feels like it's been is really like effective at doing these kinds of acrobatic things that you may not do with an orchestra, but you really can achieve that sort of intricate dance with this kind of ensemble. This piece is just really like mind-blowing.
Yeah, it really is. What I would do to have that level of just creativity with orchestration. I mean, truly unbelievable. And well said with the size of the ensemble. That didn't occur to me. But absolutely, it feels like every line is just perfectly balanced amongst every other and interwoven. It's truly spectacular.
Yeah, I wrote a sinfonietta piece this past season as well, this past fall, and that also really heavily featured the piano. This piece is actually listed as, the Khumalo piece, Broken Mirrors of Time, is actually listed as for piano and large ensemble. It maybe isn't the piano part isn't very obligato. It has like this very prominent role, and the piece that I wrote this past semester is very similar. The piano plays this almost soloistic role, sort of leading the ensemble through, and I think that helps with the sort of acrobatic feeling of it. You know, when the piano comes in, things really get going. They really start to have this feeling of urgency.
Absolutely. I mean, it should be stated, I mean, this is just phenomenally idiomatic piano writing. For your piece as well. I quite enjoy that piece. That was something that definitely occurred across my mind. The use of space, like the register, and exactly like how textures are brought through is just, there is this sort of essence of writing for the piano with an orchestra or with a large ensemble, that there are these nuances to it that you can really tell when somebody, exploits, and this is definitely one of those pieces.
Yeah. I also feel that this piece sort of connects with some of the other things that we've listened to in this playlist, specifically the very first piece, the electronics piece by Nina Young. It has this similar kind of development where you don't know where you're going. I know I said that already, but like it's sort of it feels like these two pieces almost connect for me in a way. This sort of and again, it actually connects with your piece also. There's this sort of something to listen to and for. There's this like there are things to trace and a sort of trajectory to surmise.
Yeah, I could see that. It actually comes to mind a conversation I once had with Robert Morris about Volpa's music, and in one of his symphonies, it ends with this pentatonic chord, which is just comes strikingly out of nowhere. But when you revisit it through like memory, the piece, and this I think applies to a lot of the listening we've done so far, there feels like this sense of like fatalistic inevitability, even though it's so unpredictable in the moment. The pleasure of revisiting through musical memory is really enriching and feels like everything is in its right place in that sense.
Yeah, actually mentioning Volpe feels like a very good comparison to the Khumalo piece. There's a number of Volpe pieces that feel very much like this piece. They have this sort of feeling right off the bat where we're going to go everywhere. We're going to do everything that we can with this ensemble, and with these materials laid out in front of us. Yeah. So up next, we have a string quartet, a rather long string quartet by, I guess maybe not that long, it's about 20 minutes, by composer Forbes Graham. This piece is written for a jack quartet. It's titled String Quartet Number 3. And it has a dedication to LaToya Ruby Frazier. And I really wanted to share this piece. It sort of stumbled upon me in the December month, just in the past, and it felt like something that I really wanted to share on this podcast at some point, and this episode seemed perfect. String Quartet number 3 by Forbes Graham. Man, that string quartet is like really, it's probably one of the I know it's the longest piece on our playlist, but it's also probably one of the most maybe unique, or sort of it stands out for its sort of character and its sort of boldness.
Yeah, absolutely bold. Forbes Graham's work always captivates me in its uniqueness and creativity. I remember discovering Some of the 10 Days, and which is an album he released on Bandcamp, and just immediately falling in love with his work. Just in this piece particularly, the absolute bare bones sort of simplicity of the strings writing and the somewhat sparse interjections of the electronics. It's highly captivating and meditative, but at the same time is a severe sense of tension and unease that can just occur somehow simultaneously. Truly unique work.
Yeah, I've done a little bit of research, since discovering this piece, and I spent a little bit of time specifically with the dedication to LaToya Ruby Frazier. Really sparked my interest because I had seen some of her photography, and in sort of in very public places where it had been sort of on the news and whatnot. But I went and looked through some of her work, and I got the sudden, I was sort of hit all of a sudden by this piece, and by maybe what it connects to. I almost feel like looking at photographs when listening to the piece. Like you're almost walking through a gallery or scroll. Actually, it feels almost more like clicking through a gallery on a computer to me.
Yeah.
Where you get each sound is a sort of new image. It's sort of similar, and it's maybe in the same color. It's the same black and white as the previous image, but it has a completely different shape. And I think one of the most bold things about this piece has to do with the way the performers play, where it's almost always only one performer playing at a time. There's only one member of the string quartet playing at a time. There's a handful of moments where they're playing. They never all play at the same time, or they may all play at the same time, but I didn't take note of it when it happened. I did notice when maybe 2 or 3 people were doing things that were different from each other, because that was a very different texture for most of the piece. But I will say that for a lot of the piece, it only one player is playing at a time, and the piece really, I really think it connects with a lot of this photography, especially clicking through LaToya Ruby Frazier's 2019 gallery, The Last Cruise. And some of the photographs that she's done in Flint, Michigan. It's sort of these things feel very connected, and this dedication feels very fitting. It makes me wonder about what came first, the dedication or the music. I don't know if it matters so much all of the time, but I don't know if you feel this connection. You'll have to look through some of the photographs and tell me what you think, but
Absolutely.
I think it has almost a physical connection to looking at these photographs.
Yeah, it's really interesting that you brought up this sense of observation of this gallery through clicking. That really was that sort of sense of compressed space, yet the room to observe. Really, I can get a sense of that through the music. It's really fascinating. I'll have to check out some of the photography. But yeah, I mean, just an unbelievably unique and bold, characteristically Forbes Graham work right here.
And what a really spectacular performance from Jack Quartet. I mean, not that there's anything less than spectacular when Jack Quartet plays, but this piece in particular sort of presents a very unique challenge, sort of logistical challenge.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. The concentration must be fierce.
Yeah. Almost like playing something maybe like Feldman or something similar sort of space.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so our final piece on this very long playlist curated from 2021 is Ingrid Stolzel's Musica Ignota. And I want to take this time really quickly to sort of step away from what we're doing and just very briefly remind everyone that in March, the Contemporary Art Music Project is hosting Campground 22. And this festival will involve 3 concerts on March 24th, 25th, and 26th, all in the Tampa Bay area. The one on the 24th is at the Morian Center for Clay in St. Petersburg. The one on the 25th of March is at St. Andrew's Episcopal Church in Tampa, Florida. And the 26th of March concert is at the Florida Museum of Photographic Arts in Tampa, Florida. There's more information about this festival and about these concerts becoming available. Participating composers are listed on the Campground 22 web page on the Contemporary Art Music Project site, if you're interested in checking those out. And the commission competition winners have also been selected as well, and they're listed on the site. We hope that you guys come check that festival out, and thank you so much for supporting Contemporary Art Music Project and all of the work that we're doing with these podcast series, with our concert series, with the Project Gut that happened last Monday. We really appreciate all of the support and all of the excited participation we've gotten from our audiences. Let's listen to or let's move on to this last piece. Ingrid Stolzel's Musica Ignota. I really wanted to include this piece of Ingrid Stolzel's in this playlist, especially because it's performed by a college ensemble, and it's a wind ensemble piece. It's maybe not something that always ends up in our conversations on our podcast. Something that sort of goes missed occasionally, and I think this piece is really, really wonderful. I want to take a moment to read the program notes, just because I think the story of the piece is very important. So here are Ingrid Stolzel's program notes. The famous Rhineland mystic, nun, healer, and composer Hildegard von Bingen hardly needs an introduction. Recent popular and scholarly discoveries of her music, as well as correspondences and writings on natural healing, have made her famous to the public at large. Her extraordinary achievements, all the more astonishing considering the burden of being a woman in a medieval monastic world, have made her something of an international cult figure. My composition, Musica Ignota, draws inspiration from Hildegard's music as well as her lesser-known invented language system entitled Lingua Ignota, Latin for unknown language. To write this imaginary language, she used an alphabet of 23 letters and created a glossary of over 1,000 beautiful, unknown words, presumably intended as a universal language for mystical purposes. The opening to the glossary in the Wiesbaden-Reisen Codex disarmingly states that the lingua ignota is an unknown language brought forward by the simple human being Hildegard. Having grown up in Rhineland myself, I have long been fascinated with Hildegard von Bingen, and it is my hope that the unknown music brought forth in my composition, Musica Ignota, serves as to honor her life and work.
Wow. So beautifully said.
Yeah, I wasn't familiar with the Lingua Ignota. I think it leads to like a really wonderful inspiration for this piece, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, also just the presence of new music for wind ensemble as well, and the glorious melodic writing. It was just, this work was a real treat to listen to.
Yeah, it's really, really rich, and it maintains some of that maybe like not even chant-like, but plain-like simple melodic figure, sort of simple in structure, but maybe interesting in ornamentation and the sort of way it unfolds. Absolutely.
There's this sort of humbleness to the music, which reminds me of the previous quote you just read. It really, there's something to be said for a music that feels so aware of itself. And this is one of those times when the listening experience, like, there's this sort of communal awareness, with the ensemble and composer and the inspiration that just seems really down to earth and humble.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you so much, Austin, for joining me for this episode of Earshot. I was really glad to have you on as someone to talk to about these pieces and to help me share these pieces with our audience. I hope to the audience that these pieces have been interesting or maybe something you weren't familiar with that happened in the last year. I know it was a very busy and tumultuous year for a lot of people. And we can look forward to more wonderful music from these composers and from many other composers and from our own projects, the Contemporary Art Music Project. And I really look forward to what's to come in this year as far as new music is concerned.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It was an absolute pleasure listening to all this wonderful music.
You have just listened to Earshot episode number 4. Tune in Monday nights on YouTube for the rest of the Contemporary Art Music Project podcasts. If you'd like more information about Contemporary Art Music Project, go to contemporaryartmusicproject.org. There you can read about concerts, podcasts, and the upcoming Campground 22 festival. I am Tucker Johnson, and I hope you enjoyed this episode.